I still remember the sound of my wrist breaking. It was a wet snap, like a chicken bone giving way, followed by white-hot pain that shot up my arm and exploded behind my eyes. But worse than the pain was Leo's face. My 6-year-old son stood frozen in the doorway of our living room. His Spider-Man pajamas suddenly too small, too innocent for what he was witnessing. His eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down his cheeks. And in that moment, I knew that my father had finally crossed a line I could never let him uncross. Ray stood over me, breathing hard, smelling of cheap whiskey and cigarette smoke. His face was red and twisted with rage, spittle flying from his mouth as he screamed, "You think you can say no to me? After everything I've done for you, you ungrateful bitch," behind him. Through the broken screen door he had kicked in, I could see our front yard littered with the wreckage of his tantrum. The ceramic planter my neighbor had given me for my birthday lay shattered. Leo's bike, the one I had saved 3 months to buy him, was bent and twisted where Ray had thrown it against the fence. My mother, Susan, stood in the corner of the room, her arms crossed, her face carefully blank. She hadn't moved when Ray grabbed me. She hadn't flinched when he twisted my arm behind my back. And she wouldn't meet my eyes now. If you're listening to this story and it resonates with you, please hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to make an impossible choice to protect someone you love. Your engagement helps more people find these stories and realize they're not alone. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how I got to that moment on my living room floor with a broken wrist and a broken family. 6 months earlier, my life looked normal from the outside. I was a 32-year-old single mother working double shifts at Mel's Diner on Route 9, trying to make ends meet. Leo's father had left when I was pregnant, disappearing like morning fog. When real responsibility came knocking, I had moved back in with my parents then, believing their promise that family takes care of family. What a lie that turned out to be. Ray, my father, had been a mechanic for 40 years before retiring. He was the kind of man who thought volume equaled authority and fear equaled respect. He had ruled our household with an iron fist when I was growing up, and my mother had perfected the art of looking the other way. I had escaped once, at 19, running off with Leo's father. When that fell apart, crawling back home felt like admitting defeat. But I told myself it would be temporary, just until I got back on my feet. That was 7 years ago. The house on Maple Street was a small 3-bedroom ranch with peeling yellow paint and a roof that leaked when it rained hard. Ray had bought it in 1985 and treated it like his personal kingdom. My mother kept it clean but joyless, all beige and brown and silent disappointment. Leo and I shared the smallest bedroom, the one that had been mine as a child. His twin bed was pushed against one wall, mine against the other, with barely 3 feet between them. At night, I would lie awake listening to him breathe, promising myself that tomorrow I would figure out how to give him better. The arrangement was simple, at least in Ray's mind. I paid him $600 a month in rent, which was half my income from the diner. I bought all my own food and Leo's, plus contributed another $200 for utilities. I cleaned the house every weekend, did everyone's laundry, and had to be home by 11 every night because Ray didn't want me coming and going at all hours, disturbing his sleep. In exchange, I got a roof over our heads and the privilege of listening to him tell me almost daily what a burden I was. Susan never contradicted him, never stood up for me. She had perfected the art of emotional disappearance, of being physically present but utterly absent in every way that mattered. When Ray would go on his rants about how I was wasting my life, how I was raising Leo to be soft, how I would never amount to anything, she would just keep washing dishes or folding laundry, her face smooth and empty as a mannequin's probably. The money was the first red flag, though I was too tired and too beaten down to see it clearly then. Ray was retired with a decent pension and Social Security. Susan had her own Social Security check. They owned the house outright, but somehow, they were always short on cash. Ray needed money for his card games on Thursday nights. Susan needed money for her salon appointments and her mail order catalogs, and when they came up short, they came to me. At first, it was small. $20 here, $50 there. Ray would corner me in the kitchen before my shift, breath already sour with morning beer, and tell me he was short for groceries or the electric bill. Susan would mention, casual as anything, that her car registration was due and she was just a little short. I gave it to them because I was raised to respect my parents, to honor thy father and mother, like the good Catholic girl I'd been brought up to be. But small became larger. 50 became 100. Once became weekly. And groceries and electric bills became poker debts and shopping sprees. I started picking up extra shifts, working breakfast through dinner, my feet swelling in my worn-out sneakers, my back aching from carrying heavy trays for 8 or 9 hours straight. The other waitresses at Mel's called me a machine. I let them think I was just ambitious. The truth was, I was drowning, and the people who were supposed to be my life raft were holding my head underwater. Leo was the light in all that darkness. He was 6 years old, small for his age, with my dark hair and his father's gray eyes. He was sweet and sensitive. The kind of kid who cried when he saw roadkill and who made get-well cards for his teacher when she had the flu. Ray called him soft, called him a sissy, said I was raising him to be weak. I was raising him to be kind, which Ray had never understood and never would. Leo knew things weren't right at home. Kids always know. He had started having nightmares, waking up, crying about monsters in the closet. He had started asking me questions I didn't want to answer. Why is Grandpa always mad at you? Mommy, why doesn't Grandma ever smile? Can we get our own house? That last question killed me every time because the answer was no. Not yet. Not on what I made at the diner after paying Ray his ransom and keeping us fed and clothed. I had a little money saved, hidden in an envelope taped behind my dresser drawer. But it was only $800. Not enough for first, last, and security on even the cheapest apartment in town. So I kept my head down, kept working, kept hoping that somehow things would change. The breaking point started on a Tuesday night in March. I had just finished a brutal 10-hour shift. My feet were killing me, and I was looking forward to getting home, giving Leo a bath, and maybe watching one episode of his favorite cartoon before bed. I was walking to my car in the diner parking lot when my phone rang. Ray, you need to come get me. His words were slurred, running together. Where are you? Dad, I asked, already feeling my shoulders tense. Jimmy's bar. Car won't start. You need to come get me now. Dad, I just got off work. I'm exhausted. Can't you call Mom? Your mother's asleep. You come get me or I'll walk home and you can explain to everyone why you left your father stranded. That was Ray. Everything was a threat. A manipulation. A test of loyalty that you always failed. But I was so trained to comply. So beaten down by years of his bullying that I got in my car and drove the 15 minutes to Jimmy's, a dive bar on the edge of town where Ray and his buddies spent their Thursday nights playing poker and their occasional weeknights drinking away their pensions. When I pulled into the parking lot, I could see Ray leaning against the building, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His truck was parked right there in the lot, looking perfectly fine. He hadn't even tried to start it. This was a power play. Pure and simple. He wanted me to drop everything and come running. And I had. He climbed into my passenger seat, bringing with him the smell of beer and smoke and something meaner. Something I had learned to recognize as danger. He didn't say thank you. He said, "Took you long enough." "What's wrong with your truck?" I asked, pulling out of the parking lot. Nothing. Didn't feel like driving. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Dad, I'm exhausted. I have to be back at work at 6 in the morning. You made me come all the way out here when there's nothing wrong with your truck. Watch your tone with me. He growled. I needed a ride and you're my daughter. That's what family does. I should have said something then. Should have told him that family doesn't use each other. Family doesn't demand and demean. But I was 32 and still terrified of my father's temper. Still hoping that maybe if I was good enough, compliant enough, he might finally show me a shred of respect or affection. We drove in silence until we were almost home. Then Ray said, I need money. For what? The question came out before I could stop it. None of your goddamn business. I need $300 by Friday. $300. That was almost a week's pay for me. That was groceries and gas and the new shoes Leo desperately needed because he'd outgrown his old ones. Dad, I don't have it. I'm barely making ends meet as it is. You'll figure it out. You always do. His voice was flat, dismissive, Maybe stop wasting money on crap for the kid. He doesn't need half the stuff you buy him. Something hot flared in my chest. Leo is 6 years old. He needs clothes that fit and food in his stomach and school supplies. That's not crap. Don't talk back to me. Ray's voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that preceded explosions. You live in my house. You follow my rules. And when I tell you I need money, you get me money. You got that. I pulled into our driveway and put the car in park. My hands were shaking. I can give you 100 on Friday. That's all I have. Ray turned to look at me then. His face inches from mine. His breath hot and sour. You'll give me 300, or you and that brat can find somewhere else to live. Your choice. He got out of the car and slammed the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. I sat there in the darkness, listening to my heart pound, tasting bile in the back of my throat. Inside the house, I could see the living room light on. Susan was probably watching one of her shows, pretending not to hear us arguing in the driveway. Leo was asleep when I got inside. I checked on him, pulling his blanket up around his shoulders, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. He stirred slightly and murmured, "Mom," but didn't wake. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'm here. Baby. I'm here." In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked older than 32. Tired. Defeated. There were dark circles under my eyes and lines around my mouth from constantly forcing smiles at the diner. When had I become this person? When had I stopped fighting? The next morning, I went to work early and asked Mel, the owner, if I could pick up some extra shifts. He was a gruff old man with kind eyes who had owned the diner for 30 years. "You're already working 6 days a week. Sarah," he said, "when do you sleep?" "I'll sleep when I'm dead." I tried to joke, but it came out hollow. He studied me for a long moment. "You in some kind of trouble?" "No, sir. Just trying to get ahead." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his face. But he gave me 3 extra shifts that week, including a double on Saturday. I worked until my feet bled and my back screamed, smiling at customers, refilling coffee, pretending everything was fine. By Friday, I had the $300. I handed it to Ray without a word. He took it without thanks and walked away. Susan watched from the kitchen, her face carefully neutral, saying nothing. That was when something inside me began to crack. Not break yet, but crack. A hairline fracture in the shell of compliance I had built around myself. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Ray's demands didn't stop with that 300 blains. 2 weeks later, he needed 200 for car repairs that never seemed to happen. A week after that, Susan needed money for new curtains. It was always something, and I was always expected to provide it. I started hiding money more aggressively. Instead of giving them access to my bank account for rent, I started paying in cash, which meant they couldn't see my balance. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, one they didn't know about, and started depositing my tip money there. It wasn't much, maybe $50 or $60 a week, but it was mine, and they couldn't touch it. Leo's 7th birthday was coming up in May, and I was determined to make it special. He wanted a bike, a real one, not the cheap thing Ray had destroyed in one of his earlier tantrums. I found one on sale at Walmart, a blue and silver mountain bike with training wheels that came off. It cost $120, which was money I didn't have, but I put it on layaway and paid $20 a week until it was mine. The day I brought it home, Leo's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really?" "Mom, really, it's mine. All yours." "Baby," I said, kneeling down to hug him. His arms wrapped around my neck so tight I could barely breathe, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I was doing something right. Ray saw the bike and snorted. "Waste of money. Kid doesn't need a bike that nice. He's 7 years old." I said quietly, "He deserves something nice. What he deserves is a father who didn't run off. What he deserves is a mother who can provide for him without leeching off her parents." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Leeching. I was paying them $800 a month plus doing all the housework. And I was leeching. Susan, as always, said nothing. That night, after Leo was asleep, I did something I had never done before. I went online and looked at apartments, Just looked. There wasn't much in my price range. And what there was looked like places where you got mugged on your way to your car. But I bookmarked a few. Just in case. Just to know that options existed. Even if I couldn't take them yet. The next Thursday night, everything changed. I was working the dinner shift at the diner when Ray called 7:30. Right in the middle of the rush. I sent it to voicemail. He called again. And again. On the fourth call, I stepped into the kitchen and answered. What I said, too tired and too stressed to be polite. You need to come get me. That slur in his voice again. He was drunk. Dad, I'm at work. I can't leave. You can and you will. I'm at Jimmy's and I need a ride. Call Mom. Call a cab. Call one of your buddies. I'm working. You come get me now, or there will be consequences. His voice had that edge again, that threatening tone that made my stomach clench. What kind of consequences, I asked. And I heard my own voice shake. The kind where you and that mistake you call a son find yourselves on the street. You've got 30 minutes. He hung up. I stood there in the kitchen of Mel's diner, surrounded by the sound of grills sizzling and tickets, printing and the other waitresses calling out orders, and I felt something shift inside me. That hairline crack widened. Deepened. I walked back out to the dining room and found Mel. I need to leave. Family emergency. He looked at me, really looked at me, and nodded. Go. We'll manage. I drove to Jimmy's bar with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Ray was outside, even drunker than he had sounded on the phone. He could barely stand. Getting him into the car was like wrestling a belligerent child. Except this child was 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds. About damn time, he slurred as I buckled him in. I didn't respond. I just drove. My jaw clenched so tight, my teeth ached. When we got home, Susan met us at the door. You shouldn't have called her at work, she said to Ray. But her voice was flat, empty of any real reproach. She's my daughter. She comes when I call. Ray pushed past her into the house. I followed, ready to go check on Leo, who was with our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. When Ray turned around, I need money. $300. Now. I don't have it. Yes, you do. You always have it. You're hiding it from me, but I know you have it. Dad, I just gave you $200 last week. I don't have any more. His face changed then. Went from drunk and belligerent to something darker. Something cruel. You think you can tell me no. In my house, it's not about telling you no. I literally don't have the money. Liar. He took a step toward me. You've been holding out on me, keeping money for yourself instead of helping your family. I pay you $800 a month to live in a house you own, that you bought 40 years ago. I buy all my own food. I do all the cleaning. What more do you want from me? I want some goddamn respect, Ray shouted, and his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. I want you to remember that everything you have is because I allow it. Let go of me, I said, trying to pull away, but he didn't let go. He twisted my wrist, yanking me toward him. You live by my rules or you get out. And if you think you can take that boy away from here, think again. I'll call CPS. I'll tell them you're unfit. I'll make sure you never see him again. Dad, please. You're hurting me. My wrist was on fire where he gripped it, his fingers digging into bone. You think this is hurting you, he twisted harder. And I felt something give way. On that wet snap I mentioned at the beginning. The pain was instant and overwhelming. I screamed and dropped to my knees. That's when I saw Leo. He had come through the front door, probably having seen my car pull up from Mrs. Patterson's window across the street. He was standing in the doorway in his Spider-Man pajamas, his eyes huge and terrified, tears streaming down his face. Mommy, he wailed, and started to run toward me. Stay there, I shouted, holding up my good hand. I didn't want him anywhere near Ray in this state. Ray released my wrist and took a step back, his face suddenly uncertain as he registered Leo's presence. The kid needs to toughen up, he muttered. Stop crying like a baby. I cradled my wrist against my chest, feeling it already starting to swell. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of this room. Now. Ray opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He turned and walked to his bedroom, slamming the door behind him. I looked at Susan, who had watched all of this from the kitchen doorway. Our eyes met. I waited for something. An apology. An expression of horror. An offer to help. Anything. She turned and walked to her bedroom without a word. That's when the crack became a break. Clean and complete. Something fundamental shattered inside me in that moment. Something that could never be repaired. I called Mrs. Patterson, who came over immediately. She took one look at my wrist, and her face went white. Sarah, honey, you need to go to the hospital. Can you keep Leo tonight? I asked. My voice surprisingly steady. Of course, for as long as you need. She gathered Leo up, still crying, and took him across the street. I watched through the window as she led him into her house, his little hand clutching hers. I drove myself to the emergency room at County General. The nurse who took my information looked at my swollen, misshapen wrist, and then at my face. How did this happen? Ifel, I said automatically. Sarah, she said my name like she knew me, though I had never seen her before. She was maybe 50, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. I've been a nurse for 28 years. I know what a fall looks like, and I know what someone grabbing and twisting looks like. This is the latter. Tears sprang to my eyes. I can't, I whispered. Can't. What? Can't tell me or can't leave. Both. She reached out and squeezed my good hand. You can. And you will. But first, let's get you an X-ray. My wrist was broken in 2 places. They put me in a cast that went from my knuckles to halfway up my forearm. The doctor, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 30, told me I was lucky it wasn't worse. She also, like the nurse, asked me how it really happened. I stuck to my story about falling. When I got home at 2 a.m, the house was dark and silent. Ray and Susan were both asleep, or pretending to be. I went to my room, carefully avoiding Leo's empty bed, and pulled out my phone. I spent the next 3 hours researching domestic violence resources, tenant rights, emergency housing, protective orders. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It was barely a plan at all. But it was something. First, I went to the bank when it opened and closed the joint account I shared with Ray and Susan for rent payments. I moved all the money in my secret account to a new bank across town. One they would never think to check. It wasn't much. About $1,000. But it was mine. Then I went to see a lawyer. Legal Aid of Sussex County had a small office above the hardware store downtown. The lawyer who saw me was a woman named Patricia Chen, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I told her everything. Not the fall story, but the truth about Ray's violence, Susan's complicity, the financial abuse. All of it. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she said, "You need to file for a restraining order. Today, I'm living in his house. Then you need to move out. Also today, I don't have anywhere to go. There's a women's shelter in Newton. They have space. It's not ideal, but it's safe and it's temporary while we get you on your feet. A shelter. Me and Leo in a shelter." The thought made me want to cry. But it also made me feel something else. Something like hope. "What about Leo?" I asked. Ray threatened to call CPS. To say I'm an unfit mother. Patricia's face hardened. "Let him try. You have a documented injury that he caused. You're taking steps to protect yourself and your child. Any social worker worth their salt will see that you're doing exactly what a good mother should do." We spent the next 2 hours filling out paperwork. By noon, I had a temporary restraining order that prohibited Ray from coming within 100 yards of me or Leo. Patricia also helped me file paperwork to establish that I had been paying market rate rent, which would prevent Ray from claiming I owed him money or had been living there as a dependent. I picked Leo up from Mrs. Patterson's house. She had fed him breakfast and let him watch cartoons, but I could tell he hadn't slept well. His eyes were puffy and red. "Thank you for taking care of him," I told her. "Anytime. Honey, are you okay?" I showed her my cast. "I will be." She hugged me, and I let myself lean into it for just a moment. If you need anything, she said quietly, you call me. I packed our things while Leo sat on his bed, watching me with scared eyes. Where are we going? Mommy. Somewhere safe. I said, it's going to be an adventure. The shelter was called New Horizons, and it was exactly what you'd expect. A nondescript building in an industrial part of Newton, with security cameras and a locked entrance. Inside, it was clean but institutional, with tile floors and fluorescent lights. Our room was small, maybe 10 by 12, with 2 twin beds and a shared bathroom down the hall. Leo looked around with wide eyes. Is this our new house? Just for a little while. Baby? Until Mommy finds us a better place. That night, lying in my narrow bed, listening to Leo breathe in the darkness, I made myself a promise. I was done being a victim. Done being controlled. Done sacrificing my dignity and my son's well-being for people who saw us as nothing more than a source of money and labor. Ray tried to call 43 times over the next 2 days. Susan called 16 times. I blocked both their numbers. Ray showed up at the diner on my 3rd day back at work. Mel, bless him, called the police immediately. They arrested Ray for violating the restraining order. He spent 2 nights in jail and had to post bail. That's when things got really interesting. With Ray unable to contact me, unable to show up at my work or anywhere else, I started to feel like I could breathe for the first time in years. The shelter had a counselor, a woman named Dr. Lisa Garcia, who specialized in domestic abuse. She helped me see patterns I had been blind to for decades. The way Ray used money to control me, the way he isolated me from friends and possibilities, the way Susan's silence enabled everything he did. Your mother is as responsible as your father. Dr. Garcia told me in one of our sessions, passive abuse is still abuse. She chose her comfort over your safety. Over and over again. Hearing someone say it out loud, validate what I had always felt but never acknowledged, was like having a weight lifted off my chest. I started picking up more shifts at the diner. Mel was incredibly understanding, letting me adjust my schedule around Leo's needs and my counseling sessions. I was working almost 60 hours a week, but for the first time, every dollar I earned was mine. I wasn't giving it to Ray for poker games or to Susan for catalogs. I was saving it, building a real future. The women at the shelter became like sisters. There was Maria, who was escaping her husband after 20 years of beatings. There was Keisha, whose boyfriend had tried to strangle her. There was Amy, whose parents had kicked her out for being gay. We watched each other's kids, shared clothes, cooked meals together in the communal kitchen. We cried together and laughed together, and slowly began to believe that maybe we deserved better than what we had been given. 6 weeks after we moved to the shelter, I found an apartment. It was tiny. A 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old building, but it had a working stove and heat and windows that locked. The rent was $700 a month, which was less than I had been paying Ray. Leo and I would share the bedroom. I would sleep on the couch. It was perfect. Moving day was a Saturday in early June. Mrs. Patterson showed up with her son's truck to help me move the few things we owned. Mark, one of the line cooks at the diner who I had become friendly with, showed up with his brother. We moved everything in 3 trips, which tells you how little we had. That night, Leo and I ate pizza on the floor of our new living room and watched TV on a 10-inch screen I had bought at a thrift store. This is the best house ever, Leo said, his mouth full of pepperoni. Yeah, baby. I agreed. It really is. Ray violated the restraining order 3 more times. Each time, he was arrested. Each time, the judge added days to his jail sentence. After the 3rd violation, the judge made the restraining order permanent and told Ray that 1 more violation would result in a felony charge. Susan called from a number I didn't recognize about a month after we moved into the apartment. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. You've destroyed this family, she said without preamble. Your father is facing criminal charges because of you. We might lose the house. I hope you're happy. I could have hung up. Should have. Probably, but something in me needed to say this. I didn't destroy anything. Mom, I just stopped letting you destroy me. There's a difference. We gave you everything. a roof over your head, food, family. You gave me nothing but pain and demands. You stood by and watched him break my wrist and you didn't say a word. You don't get to play the victim now. I am your mother. You stopped being my mother a long time ago, when you chose him over me, over and over again. When you let him hurt me and did nothing. A mother protects her child. You protected your own comfort. How dare you? No. Mom. How dare you? How dare you call me and try to make me feel guilty for saving myself and my son? I'm done. Don't call me again. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt strong. Stronger than I had ever felt. The summer passed in a blur of work and apartment decorating and watching Leo slowly come back to himself. His nightmares stopped. He started smiling again. Really smiling. He made friends at his new school in the fall. I met with Patricia Chen regularly, working out the legal details of making sure Ray could never have access to Leo. In September, I got a promotion at the diner. Mel made me assistant manager, which came with a small raise and health insurance. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Real, tangible progress. That's when Detective Miller came to see me. He was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a wedding ring worn thin. Miss Thompson, I'm investigating an assault case involving your father, Ray Thompson. Would you be willing to answer some questions? What kind of assault case? I asked, letting him into my apartment. I got into a fight at a bar last month. Put another man in the hospital. The victim is pressing charges, and the DA is building a case. I understand your father has a history of violence. I told him everything. About my wrist. About the other times Ray had been physically aggressive. About the financial abuse. I gave him dates. Times. As many details as I could remember. He took notes and recorded our conversation with my permission. This helps, he said when we were done. Establishes a pattern of behavior. Thank you for being willing to talk to me. 2 months later, Ray was charged with aggravated assault, combined with his violations of the restraining order. He was looking at serious jail time. His lawyer tried to make a deal, but the DA, a woman named Jennifer Hartwell, wasn't interested. She wanted to send a message about domestic violence and violent offenders. Ray went to trial in December. I was called as a witness. Walking into that courtroom and seeing him at the defense table, looking small and old and defeated, was surreal. He wouldn't look at me. Susan sat in the gallery, her face frozen. I testified about my wrist, about his threats, about the years of financial abuse. The defense attorney tried to make me seem vindictive, like I was exaggerating out of spite. But I had documentation, medical records, police reports, testimony from the shelter counselors. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Ray guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in prison. Susan tried to approach me outside the courtroom. Are you happy now? She hissed. You've sent your father to prison. I didn't send him anywhere, I said calmly. He sent himself. He made choices, over and over again, to hurt people. Now he's facing consequences. That's called justice. I hope you rot in hell, she said. I spent years in hell already. Mom, I'm out now. And I'm not going back. That was the last time I spoke to her. Life moved forward. Leo turned 8, then 9. I kept working at the diner, kept saving money. I started taking online classes at the community college, working toward a business degree. It was slow going, 1 or 2 classes a semester. But it was progress. In the spring, Mel started talking about retiring. He was 73 and ready to spend his days fishing instead of flipping eggs. You ever think about buying this place? He asked me one day. With what money? I laughed, but he was serious. I could sell it to you with owner financing. You'd make payments to me instead of a bank. You've basically been running this place for the past year anyway. The idea took root. Me, owning a business, being my own boss. It seemed impossible, but Mel was determined. He had his lawyer draw up the papers. The purchase price was manageable with his financing terms, and the diner was profitable. It wouldn't make me rich, but it would be mine. I signed the papers in June. By July, the sign out front read Sarah's Diner. Leo was so proud he nearly burst. My mom owns a restaurant, he told everyone at school. Around the same time, I got news about Ray. He had been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. Years of drinking had finally caught up with him. He was sick, getting sicker, and the prison medical system wasn't equipped to provide the level of care he needed. Susan called me from yet another new number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Your father is dying. Her voice was flat, emotionless. The doctors say he has maybe 6 months. He's being released early on compassionate grounds. I waited for the guilt to hit. The obligation, the pull of family ties. Nothing came, just a kind of distant sadness for the man he could have been and never was. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. I was sorry that he had wasted his life being cruel. Sorry that he had chosen alcohol and anger over love and connection. But I wasn't sorry for protecting myself and Leo. He wants to see you, Susan continued. Before he dies, he wants to make peace. Does he want to make peace or does he want absolution, I asked. What's the difference? One is about him taking responsibility for what he did. The other is about making himself feel better before he dies. Which one is it? Silence on the other end. Then, he's your father. He stopped being my father when he broke my wrist in front of my son. When he threatened to take Leo from me. When he spent decades making me feel worthless. Biology doesn't erase those things, so you're just going to let him die alone. He has you, doesn't he? Unless you're finally ready to admit that standing by and watching him abuse me makes you just as guilty. She hung up. 3 months later, on a cold afternoon in October, I was working the lunch shift at the diner when Ray walked in. I didn't recognize him at first. He had lost at least 50 pounds. His skin had a yellowish tinge from the liver failure. He moved slowly, carefully, like every step hurt. I looked 70, not 58. He sat down at the counter, and I felt every muscle in my body tense. But I had worked too hard, come too far, to let fear control me anymore. What can I get you? I asked. My voice, professional and distant. Coffee. Black. His voice was raspy, weak. I poured him a cup and set it down. He wrapped his hands around it like he was trying to absorb its warmth. Nice place you got here, he said after a long moment. Thank you. I heard you bought it. I did. Another long silence. Other customers were starting to notice. Whisper. Small town gossip moved fast. I could feel Mark watching from the kitchen, ready to intervene if needed. I'm sorry, Ray said finally. For everything. I studied him. His hands were shaking. His eyes were rheumy and bloodshot. He looked like a ghost of the man who had terrorized my childhood, controlled my adult life. Broken my wrist? Are you? I asked. Are you really sorry? Or are you scared of dying with the weight of what you did on your conscience? He flinched like I had slapped him. Can it be both? I suppose it can, I acknowledged. But your apology doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo the years of abuse. It doesn't erase the nightmares Leo had. It doesn't heal my wrist or the parts of me you broke that were harder to see. I know, he said quietly. I know I was a terrible father. A terrible man. The things I did to you, to your mother, they were unforgivable. So why are you here? Because I'm dying and I don't want to die without at least trying to say I'm sorry. Even if you can't forgive me, even if I don't deserve it. I looked at this broken man at my counter and felt nothing. No rage. No satisfaction. No pity. Just a kind of peaceful emptiness where he used to live in my head. I can't forgive you, I said honestly. I don't have forgiveness in me for what you did. But I can tell you this. I'm not angry anymore. I spent too many years letting you take up space in my thoughts. Letting what you did to me define who I was. I'm done with that. You're just a sick old man now. And you can't hurt me anymore. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. Can I see Leo just once? No. The word was firm. Absolute. He's healing. He's happy. He's learning what a safe, loving home feels like. I won't bring your toxicity back into his life. Even for a goodbye. You made your choices. Now you live. And Dee? With them. Ray nodded slowly. Accepting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. Set it on the counter next to his untouched coffee. For the coffee, he said. He stood up. moving like every bone in his body ached, and shuffled toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. You turned out strong. Stronger than me. I'm glad Leo has you. Then he was gone. I picked up the 20 and looked at it for a long moment. Then I walked to the register, made change, and went outside. Ray was shuffling down the sidewalk toward the bus stop. I caught up to him and pressed the change into his hand. The coffee's on the house. I said, not for you. For the man you could have been if you had made better choices. He looked at the money, then at me, nodded, and walked away. I never saw him again. Ray died 6 weeks later in the county hospice. Susan called to tell me about the funeral. I didn't go. Instead, I took Leo to the movies and out for ice cream. We laughed and talked about his upcoming birthday and the new video game he wanted. He had no idea that his grandfather had died that day, and I saw no reason to tell him. Ray had earned no space in Leo's grief. Susan tried one more time. About a month after Ray's death, she showed up at the diner on a Tuesday morning, dressed in black, looking older than her 60 years. She sat at a booth and waited until the breakfast rush died down before approaching me. I need help, she said without preamble. The house is in foreclosure. Ray's medical bills ate through everything. I don't have anywhere to go. I looked at her. This woman who had given birth to me, but had never really been my mother. Who had watched me suffer and done nothing. Who had called me selfish for saving myself. There are resources, I said calmly. The county has programs for seniors in financial distress. The church runs a food pantry. Social services can help you find housing. You have money now. You have this place. You could help me. I could. I agreed. But I won't. Her face flushed with anger. I'm your mother. You were present when I was born. You provided food and shelter. But you were never my mother in any way that mattered. A mother protects her child, stands up for them, loves them unconditionally. You did none of those things. You chose a violent, alcoholic man over your daughter every single time. You enabled his abuse. You blamed me for his actions. You were complicit in every harm he caused me. I did the best I could. No, I said, and my voice was hard. You did what was easiest for you. And now you want me to bail you out. Just like you always did. You want me to sacrifice my security, my business, my peace of mind so you can be comfortable. But I'm done sacrificing for people who never valued the sacrifice. So that's it, you're just going to let me end up homeless. I'm going to let you face the consequences of your choices. Just like I had to face the consequences of the situation you and Ray put me in. The difference is, I had a 6-year-old to protect and no resources. You're an adult with access to social services. Figure it out. Susan stood up, her face twisted with bitterness. You've become heartless. No, I said quietly. I've become free. There's a difference. She left, and I felt nothing but relief. A few weeks later, I saw Susan at the grocery store. I was there with Leo, shopping for the week. She was at the checkout with a basket containing a can of soup, a loaf of bread, and some instant coffee. She looked diminished somehow, smaller than I remembered. Our eyes met across the store. I saw something in her face then, something I had never seen before. Regret. Maybe. Or just the realization of how completely alone she was. Leo tugged on my sleeve. Mom, can we get the cookies? I looked down at my beautiful, happy, healthy son. Then back at Susan. I could have walked away. Should have. Probably. She deserved nothing from me. But I had learned something in my journey from victim to survivor. Revenge wasn't about making others suffer. It was about refusing to let their toxicity poison you anymore. And holding on to hatred, even justified hatred, was just another way of letting them control you. I walked over to Susan at the checkout. She looked at me warily, waiting for another confrontation. Add her groceries to my bill, I told the cashier. Susan's eyes widened. Why? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what she had become. A bitter, lonely old woman who had sacrificed her daughter for a man who had never deserved that loyalty. She would live with that choice for the rest of her life. That was punishment enough, because I don't want to be the kind of person who watches someone struggle and does nothing. I said quietly. I don't want to be like you. I paid for her groceries and mine, took Leo's hand, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Susan call out, "Thank you." I didn't turn around, didn't respond, just kept walking toward my car, toward my life, toward my future. That was 2 years ago. Today, I own a successful diner that employs 12 people. I'm 6 classes away from my business degree. Leo is 11 now, thriving in middle school, playing soccer, and getting straight A's. He's kind and confident and secure in the knowledge that he's loved. He asks about his grandfather sometimes, but without much emotion. Ray is just a vague memory to him now, not a source of trauma. I started dating Mark, the line cook, about a year ago. It's slow and careful and nothing like the desperate relationships I had before. He's patient with my boundaries, good with Leo, and makes me laugh. We're talking about moving in together next summer, but there's no rush. For the first time in my life, I'm building something at my own pace, on my own terms. Susan lives in a senior apartment complex across town. I see her occasionally at the grocery store. We don't speak, but I've started nodding to her when our eyes meet. Not forgiveness. Exactly. More like acknowledgement that we both exist, that we both survived the wreckage Ray left behind, and that we're both doing the best we can with what remains. My wrist still aches when it rains. The scar from where the cast rubbed is still visible, a thin white line on my skin. Sometimes I catch myself rubbing it absently, and I think about that night. The pain, the fear, Leo's face. The moment everything changed, but then I look around at the life I've built. This diner with my name on it. This apartment, that's truly mine. This son who knows he's safe. This future that I'm creating one day at a time, and I realize the scar isn't a reminder of what was done to me. It's proof of what I survived, what I overcame, what I built from the ashes of that life. I broke free from people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money and control. I built boundaries. I chose myself and my son over toxic obligation. And I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who protects you, who celebrates your victories and holds you through your defeats. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made the right choice. Days when I was so tired I could barely stand. Moments when the guilt almost overwhelmed me. When that voice in my head told me I should have tried harder, forgiven more, sacrificed just a little longer. But I didn't. I chose differently. And that choice saved me and my son. I don't know if this is revenge exactly. Ray died sick and alone. Consequences of his own choices. Susan lives in lonely isolation. The same choice she made every day. She stayed silent. But I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I just refused to go down with them. And that refusal was the most powerful thing I ever did. So here's what I want you to understand. If you're in a toxic relationship, whether it's with a parent, a partner, a friend, whoever, you don't owe them your suffering. You don't owe them another chance after they've squandered all the ones before. You don't owe them forgiveness just because society says family is everything. Some families are toxic. Some love is poisonous. And sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is walk away and build something better. It won't be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. But on the other side of that pain is freedom, is peace, is a life that belongs to you, and you deserve that life. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you walked away from a toxic relationship? Or are you still trying to figure out if you can? Drop your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes, knowing you're not alone is the first step toward freedom. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have helped Susan at the grocery store? Or walked away? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Remember, you're not responsible for fixing people who broke themselves. You're only responsible for saving yourself and protecting the people who depend on you. Choose yourself. Build your boundaries. Create your future. And never, ever apologize for surviving.